Hi, I'm Matt Carey, documentary editor for Deadline Hollywood, and so happy to be here for this conversation about the hit Netflix documentary Mucho Mucho Amor, with our two directors of the film, Cristina Costantini and Kareem Tabsch. It's terrific to have you here.
Here
There you
we
are.
are.
You don't have your capes on today, but this film Mucho Mucho Amor is such a celebration of a fascinating and one of a kind human being, Walter Mercado. And I don't know how many people know him before seeing the film. He certainly was extremely well known throughout Latin America and other parts of the world. But uh, tell me a little bit about this extraordinary man, Walter Mercado. He was an astrologer, I guess a bit of a psychic, and a television presence unlike any other.
Yeah, well, first of all, Kareem and I always joke that we made this documentary so that we could wear the capes because any opportunity we get, we'll wear sparkles and capes. But yeah, thank you so much for having us. We're so excited to be here. Walter is what we always compare him to is we say he's our Mr. Rogers, our Oprah Winfrey, and our Liberace all mixed in one. And he appeared every day growing up when we were kids on television, on Univision, at the same time. And oftentimes, we were with our grandmothers. A lot of Latinos have the kind of same experience of Walter. And we would be with our families and he would come on the television and everybody would have to shut up. And every age, from grandmothers to little kids, we were all transfixed by this magical being. And, he looks like Liberace. He has although he hated that comparison. But he had fabulous bouffant hair and amazing sequins and sparkles. And he would read our horoscope every day, and he would tell us that tomorrow was going to be a better day. And I think for an immigrant community in the United States, especially throughout Latin America, for people who are struggling to make ends meet, that message was super important. And I think, in that message, he taught us to be kind to one another and above all to practice love. And I think that message never goes out of style. And right now, more than ever in our world, there's so much division and polarization that his message of unity, I think, resonates with Kareem and I both. And we felt like it was a time to bring Walter's message back and to remind people of one of the most important lessons that we'll ever learn, that we learned as kids, which is to be kind to each other and to accept people who are different than you are.
And how did the film come about?
Walter would say, according to the stars, it was perfect. Um, it came about in the oddest of ways. So Christina and I are with you today, but there's kind of a third part of our trio, our filmmaking trio, and that is our producer, Alex Fumero. So Alex was a VP at HBO, living in New York. I was heading to New York, and a buddy of ours said, "You guys should meet. You'll totally get along." Famously, Alex is from Miami. I am from Miami, where I still live. And so we went and we're having like lunch in Bryant Park, and just getting to know each other. And he's like, "Well, anything you're looking forward to?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm actually going to Walter Mercado's estate sale in Miami in a few weeks." And he's like, "That's amazing. I'm super jealous I can't go." He said, "If ever there was a film that I would love to help make, it's a documentary on Walter Mercado." And I admitted that aside from trying to get my hands on a cape of my own, I was hoping to meet Walter's family or someone to get to Walter, because he kind of disappeared. We didn't know what, but I thought it was a great opportunity for a documentary. And he said, "Great, let's talk when you get back." And I went to the estate sale, and there I met his one of his nieces, Danette, and I gave her a quick elevator pitch of the day, and she was really nice and said, "That sounds interesting," and just kind of nodded her head. Then I went back on the last day of the sale, which is when you get the real good deals.
Oh yeah.
And I gave her the pitch again, and she said, "Okay, here's my card. Send me an email. This is something he may be open to." Alex and I had scheduled our first kind of production call about this, and half an hour before, one Cristina Costantini had called Alex. They had worked together at Fusion, and said, "I hear you're obsessed with Walter Mercado. I want to make a movie about him." And Alex is like, "You're not gonna believe this, but I'm already making a movie about him. I have my first call in half an hour with the other director, but I think you guys would get along, and I think your skill sets are complementary. Maybe you should join the call." And so, like, a text message asking me if I was down for a chat later, and a 45-minute phone call, we decided that we were gonna make the movie together. Never having met, like, Alex was our Yenta the matchmaker. Um, and we're off to the races. All we had to do at that point was convince Walter to make the movie.
Walter he grew up in Puerto Rico. I think the term we would use now is non-binary. I'm sure that term did not exist back then. And I mean, he clearly was very different in his appearance and his just how he viewed the world. There was a little bit of a St. Francis kind of element about him where, he first attracted attention by kind of breathing life back into a bird. And I think people really recognized that he had a special healing gift. But as he eventually, through many twists and turns, became this television fixture and this sort of public astrologer, how popular was he? How big was Walter?
Walter was huge. 120 million people a day would tune on to watch Walter, which is like a Super Bowl audience every single day. So part of the reason that we wanted to make this movie is to honor this incredible legacy that this person has left. And Kareem and I both came up with this idea separately, and we're both shocked to find out that this hadn't been done yet, that he hadn't been approached about a documentary, just because he was so popular, so huge, and so ahead of his time. Like you were saying, he was gender non-conforming before that was a thing. He was mixing astrology with world religions and preaching this kind of holistic message of love and faith and hope in this really unique way. And especially in a homophobic culture, especially in a super Catholic culture, to be breaking all of those rules and then to be loved for it is totally unheard of. And so, what he was doing at that time was really remarkable. And to be loved as a gender nonconforming person in this culture is truly exceptional. And I think for a lot of people, it had a great importance. And I don't know, Kareem, if you want to talk about the feeling of watching him as a kid. But I think it was important to a lot of people who didn't fit into very square categories that we have in the Latin community.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, first of all, he was a great unifier, right? Like, it was a commonality that everybody watched him. And, I love telling the stories. So Christina's 30 and I am 40. And we had the same exact experience 10 years apart of, like, sitting down in front of the television and watching him with our abuelas. Like, it was appointment viewing at 5:45 every afternoon. And Walter had the power to shut up an entire Latino household because, like, if you spoke, you'd get like a flip-flop upside the head. But it was just this kind of unifying factor across, more than one generation. And, one of the many remarkable things about Walter is how he managed to excel and become so ingrained in the culture despite being so vastly different. Like, we had never seen anybody who looked like Walter, who talked like Walter, who expressed themselves like Walter, or who talked about the things Walter talked about. He was just kind of this alien figure. And in that, he still was remarkably able to connect with people from very conservative backgrounds, people who consider themselves very kind of Catholic and, toe the line. And so for me, as a young boy watching him, I didn't know, first of all, I didn't know if he was a man or a woman. I was mesmerized. And I remember just thinking at some point, I was like, he's different in a way that maybe I'm different. And I didn't know what gay was then. I hadn't necessarily come out to myself or anyone. but I knew that there was a difference in Walter, and there was a sense of simpatico in watching him on television that I could identify with it. I didn't have aspirations to be as fabulous as Walter, and I would never be able to achieve them even if I did, because he's at a different level. But here is this fabulous person, this different person, seemingly very wealthy, seemingly very happy, very successful, and most importantly, beloved, like by a community in an entire part of the world, but most importantly, beloved by my family. And so if Walter, being himself, being so different, being so out there, going against the grain, can be so loved by my family, then maybe I could be loved being myself. And when I can't overstate the importance of that. When you see that at a young point in your life, it's a sense of validation, it's a sense of hope, and it's extremely meaningful, and it's something that stayed with me my entire life.
I think one of the things that fascinates me about him, and people who've seen, millions of people who've seen the film on Netflix have got an experience of that, of how important his training as a dancer was, because he moved in this just amazing way, and he would sort of present his face. I don't know how to put it. To me, he feels like a character out of an Almodovar movie or something. But tell me about just his presence. It was mesmerizing, and that dance training, I think, was important.
Yeah, I think Walter is a very smart person, and I think a lot of people underestimate him. But he understood television to be a visual medium. He understood that he had only a few seconds while you're flipping through television to capture you, and he used every tool at his disposal to get you to listen and pay attention, all in the service of his principal message of love, of preaching love and hope. So he used his hands a lot in his dancing training, and so there's like all of these iconic kind of hand poses that like Latino, if you like look on Instagram, #Walter Mercado, there's like all these people doing the things that he's known for. And a lot of them come from dance. And so he was always using his hands. He was wearing the craziest capes you can imagine. And that was part of the equation too. That was part of the brilliance of it all, was he knew people would tune in to see what he was wearing. And he always says his message was the picture, but everything else was the frame. And he said, people love stupid things. So I use stupid things to get people to care about what I had to say. And so he the other thing I think people don't understand is Walter is in on his own joke. He knows why he's funny, and he has an incredible sense of humor. So, it was really hard to catch him or to get him to open up, because he's a consummate performer. And that was one of the hardest parts for Kareem and I interviewing him, is he has decades in front of a camera, decades of media training, and he would never let his guard down. He would never appear in a way that he didn't want to be perceived, because he was so media savvy, such a performer. His entire life was performance. And yeah, we were never going to break him. So, an example of that is one of my favorite parts in the film is we're talking about his sexuality and how he identifies, and, if he's attracted to men or women or both, and he says, I have sexuality with the wind. I have sexuality with the stars. For me, sexuality is not this physical thing. And Kareem says, okay, but you're not telling me you're a virgin. And he kind of squares up to the camera and he goes, the only one in town. And Kareem and I laughed so hard, and Alex too, that we totally lost our kind of our track of questioning. And I'm an investigative reporter by training. That is what I'm trained to do, to know when somebody is diverting. And I totally lost it, because he's so good at what he does. He's so good at entertaining that I couldn't keep going with our line of questioning.
We didn't stand a chance. It's really the thing at the end. We didn't stand a chance. He was brilliant. But the other funny thing is, like, subtle things that I think influence, like Cristina loves dancing and did flamenco when in high school. And so there was that connection, and it's just like, and he was obsessed with, Walter was obsessed with movies. And so he and I had that connection. And it's really interesting how those things kind of weave themselves into the film in almost a natural state. Like a lot of the archival, you'll see he's really kind of hand emotive. And I think it's like tuning into that connection with Cristina and that over the top Norma Desmond quality that I'm kind of, that it was natural to him and I gravitated towards. Those are just who he was. But it's interesting when you see this film, how they filter into it.
And I think the film is super entertaining, and I think came at such an important time as we were all dealing with this pandemic, and the world in such a terrible state in many ways, whether it was politics or the pandemic. So he really was bringing joy to people, but that's kind of what he did throughout his life. Is that he really truly was a motivational figure. That really struck me. That it may have been as simple as somebody saying, you're okay, and I love you. That was really a powerful message for his audience, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Kareem and I, people think sometimes it's strange that we did a whole movie on an astrologer because Kareem and I are kind of cynics when it comes to astrology. We're not believers. But I think the more we watched him, we've spent so much time watching him. If you listen to his horoscopes very closely, there's only a few messages that come across. It's like, Libra, tomorrow's going to be a better day. Scorpio, yesterday was hard, but keep going. And every single one for 30 years was more or less the same. It was, things are going to get better. Things are hard right now. You might be going through a difficult time, but have hope, have love, have faith. And that is an incredibly important message. And I think especially right now, we're all stuck at home in these little weird screen worlds, and people are dying. And I think, especially the Latino community really has been comforted by seeing Walter again. And we've gotten so many messages and emails and seeing on Twitter all these people who are like, I needed Walter now. Walter has been like reminding me of some of the most sacred moments of my childhood, and hearing him tell me to have faith, or to have love and to have hope, is exactly what I needed. So it's been weird releasing this movie during COVID, but it's been, I think, so joyful to see the effect that it's had on our community. And people who didn't grow up with him too. It's been really fun to see people get to know him who need his message right now.
Mm-hmm. You talk about the fact that he disappeared. He had this really unfortunate dispute with his manager that really kind of knocked him out of the picture for a long time. But he's been rediscovered by a young generation. What do you think they find in him that resonates with them?
Yeah, I think that for one, you can't minimize the power of nostalgia. Like, he automatically transports us back to being in that living room, in that kitchen with our grandmothers or our parents, and like to a more innocent time when we were a child. But I think that, there's the context. Like, when you see him now, you see, like, Walter was, what we'd call him, extra, right? Walter was extra from day one. He was unabashedly himself. If he came on television today, he would still be breaking ground, right? Think about, this is, he'd been off the air, I think, at this point, maybe 15 years he's been off the air. But when he was on the air, it was so groundbreaking. And he had this sense of pride and this sense of acceptance, like, I am who I am, you could be who you are. And I think that really is resonating with like younger audiences who are finding the courage to be their most authentic self, who are, navigating the world and creating a world that they want to live in. And having a figure like Walter in it is astounding.
And talk about as Latinx filmmakers, we don't see that many stories this year, even in documentary, about issues and people and things that are important to the Latinx community. why was that? How important was that to you to bring this story forward? Because it's one of pride, certainly, for I think people throughout the Latin American world.
Yeah, I think both for Kareem and I, we have a sense that this story was one that very much deserved to be told. That he's a legend in our community, and there are so many stories in our community that haven't been told. I think, you know, as Kareem said before, we are much bigger than the border story, than the immigration story, than the drug trafficking story, and I think, you know, that's often the box that Latino stories get painted into. And, you know, I think we both felt very strongly, and we weren't funded. We had maybe a seventh of the budget that we needed to make this movie. As we were making it, we were calling in tons of favors. We were delaying payments. We were, you know, this whole project could not have happened without a lot of people who are doing it for the love of Walter and the project. And we're really grateful to the team behind this, because, you know, when we were trying to make it, for example, I was meeting with an agent who wanted to represent me at the time, and she said to me that this was coming off of Science Fair, which I had just finished, and she said, well, you know, crossover stories are really hard. Crossover stories don't really work for us. They're hard to sell. And the real problem that I saw was that there were not people in the rooms commissioning documentaries, or not enough, who understood the importance of Walter in our community. And it wasn't actually until we found a team with two amazing champions for our community, Zana Lawrence and Bernardo Loyola, who understood the power of Walter, the power of Latino stories, that the film was bought. But you know, I think it speaks to the importance of representation in these rooms, and that it was such an uphill battle to make it. You know, documentary is always an uphill battle, but I think we really had a chip on our shoulder in the making of the film, that we had to finish it, and it had to be good, because there are not that many opportunities, and I think we had this sense that we have to do it and do it well, so that the people that come next can have something that they can reference, you know, and everybody on set, I think, felt that importance of really making a great documentary, so that the next one has an easier time.
And I'm curious about using, you know, Spanish in the title. Now, one would hope that everybody out there knows what Mucho Mucho Amor means, but you can't totally take that for granted. Did you have any hesitation about using that title?
Yeah, I mean, we went back and forth quite a bit on what we were going to call the film. For a long time, the working title was just Walter, and we were going to call that one Walter of the Miracles. Was another one. I actually can't remember them all. But
Legend of Walter. Like, there were a lot of like the kind. Yeah, there were a lot of names like that.
But when we kind of, I think we realized Mucho Mucho More was one of the first and most obvious ones. And I think that even we had a little hesitation at some point when we thought about it, because we're like, well, we don't want to be pigeonholed, we don't want to put people off, and we realized, like, you know, just like Walter was super authentic, we had to make sure we were authentic at every juncture. And first of all, that's the phrase that everyone remembers from Walter, but most importantly, that was the message that Walter imparted, and that was the message that we wanted to impart with our film. So yeah, we thought about it. We were like, you know, are people in Poughkeepsie gonna watch a movie called Mucho Mucho Amor, or know whatever the hell that is? But the joy has been that first of all, we should say that, like, the execs at Netflix were wonderful, never suggested us to rethink the title, totally got it from the onset, thought that it was really smart, so that was really encouraging. The great part is that people have discovered. We joke that we made this film so Walter could be seen by a wider audience, but sometimes I also say by a whiter audience, because people who did not grow up with him, knowing who he is, have had this like joyful discovery of him. and have been and so many of them, right, have been clicking on a movie called Mucho Mucho Amor. And so that's kind of this great, I think, great commentary on like our world and our culture. Like, yeah, we've been going through some tough times, and Lord knows that the divisiveness that exists in our culture is huge. But the fact that so many people are still gonna watch a film that main titles in Spanish and say, I'm open to this, says a lot about where we are, where we're going, and I hope it sends a big message to the film industry, to really consider that our stories, our authentic Latino stories, and our heroes, um, they deserve their moment in the sun, and shouldn't be a moment, rather. They deserve a place at the table, and we as Latino filmmakers and Latinx filmmakers deserve a place at the table to be sharing these stories.
We spent a great deal of time with him in Puerto Rico, in his home. And as it turned out, these were kind of his last years. So it was really a privileged position. But I cannot imagine what it would be like being in his house and with his loyal friend and helper and assistant, who's also a wonderful character in the film. Uh, Partly because Walter was, quite sensitive about his appearance and everything. But what what was it like spending so much time with him?
Yeah, it was. I mean, we're laughing because it was we had so much fun. There was a lot of fun moments. There was also a lot of like anxiety and stressful moments. For that reason, in particular, he understood the camera better than anyone. Willie understands the camera better than anyone, and Willie in particular was very protective of us and how we, rather protective of Walter, and didn't want Walter to appear in a way that he didn't want him to appear. Now, it took us, as we filmed this over the course of 2 years. And over the course of those 2 years, I think we got closer to them. They began to trust us and saw that we were like, this was not a piece with the intention of making fun of Walter. It was a piece to celebrate Walter, and really tell his life story. And the more that we spent time around us, the more they would, let the camera go wherever we wanted to go and really capture what Walter's life was like. Because at the beginning, I also think there's a misunderstanding of what a documentary is. And so they would say like, okay, so this morning we're going to perform breakfast for you, and we're like, this is what he will be wearing, and this is how he will be interacting with the world. And the longer we got there, we'd have to say, no. Oh, and I remember at the very beginning, they asked us for the scripts. They're like, when are you bring? When will I receive the script for this morning? And the longer we were with them, the more they understood that this was actually what we were just filming him doing his thing. And I remember he would always say to us, but Kareem, Cristina, this is such a boring movie we're making. It is like, you have hundreds of hours of me just around my house. What is this movie? And I think he was a little skeptical, but then we got to show him near the very end of his life. We were with him 5 weeks before he passed away, and we were able to show him a bit of the movie. We had 20 minutes that were, I think, really like cut and in good shape, and he loved it. I mean, he was I think that's the moment he understood that we were actually filmmakers and we knew what we were doing. But one of our greatest regrets is he wasn't able to see the film, and he wasn't able to be there at Sundance after so much time out of the limelight to see the effect he still had on many people.
Yeah, as he says in the film, though, that I wrote this down, that my spirit and my message is going to be eternal, which is really quite powerful and poignant. And do you think that's true?
100%. 100%. For one, there will never be another Walter Mercado. I mean, the magnetism, the power he had to make you feel loved and special. We went in as fans, right? We went in as, here's this figure that's walked out of that little box in the living room and is now in front of us and is larger than life. And we left as fans, I think even more so, because the fascinating thing about Walter, and even us as kind of like skeptics and non-believers, is like, you know, watching him made you feel good. He inspired you. He was this great motivational speaker. He was like that in person. I don't think that there was, you know, ever a day that we, even in his roughest days, and we were with him in some of the roughest, at the end of his life, there was never a day that he didn't make sure that he made you laugh and that he made you feel loved. He had this amazing feeling to make you feel like you were not you were the only person in the room that mattered, but you were also the only person in the universe that mattered. And part of shooting with him was, when the day was done, if we'd gone out in public, if there was, you know, people around, he would take a moment to say goodbye to everyone in the room, connect with them, shake their hands. And he had that ability to make you feel special. And that was just authentically who he was. That was part of who he was. And I think that comes across in the film, and it comes across in his message. I think, you know, he taught us these lessons that are the most valuable lessons, right? That today is difficult, but tomorrow will be better. That you need to love everyone, including yourself. And that, you know, the world may be a difficult place, and that's okay. But as long as you live a life leading and full of love, you will be able to get through any circumstance. And, you know, we don't have enough people who remind us of that. And for decades, Walter did that. And I think that what we saw with the release of the film and the memories that it brought back for people and the new people who discovered it in him, is that it is a message that is eternal, and he's a great messenger to be sharing it.
And you talked about your being fans yourselves. You certainly talked with one of his super fans we see in the film of Lin-Manuel Miranda. That was very cool that you got to spend time, and then Lin-Manuel and his father then got to meet Walter, and it was clearly such an emotional encounter for them.
Yeah, I think part of that scene is so powerful for us, because I think in that moment, Lin-Manuel is a stand-in for so many other people who would have the exact same reaction he did. I mean, Lin is choked up and Walter is choked up. And I think what you don't see is behind the camera, all of Lin-Manuel's team was crying and all of Walter's team was crying. Like I think it meant a lot for the people, for everybody on set. It was like yesterday's superstar meeting today's superstar. You know, Puerto Rico is a small island, and a lot of people felt that this was like what did Walter say? These two titans of industry admiring each other. That's how I remember we debriefed about it. It was very important for both of them, and I think in the film shows you just how big he is. If a superstar like Lin-Manuel can be fangirling about Walter, the rest of the Latino community will also be fangirling. So yeah, we love that. We love that scene. And then when he gets to try on the cape, Puerto Rican cape, it was incredible. It was really fun to be there.
It still gets me choked up. I always say I made the movie and I still get choked up when I watch that scene. It's and we were also teary-eyed in the background. We talk about everybody, but we were like,
yeah, not us.
Yeah. It was so special, and it just like, you know, he was Cristina has said it time and time again. Lin's kind of the avatar for like everyone who grew up with him and all the feelings that he brought. So it was such a wonderful moment to witness. I think Walter also needed it when it happened.
Yeah, Walter was not already at that point. Walter was not doing well. His health was leaving him. You know, when we first started filming with Walter, he was in such great health. He was doing yoga. He was down on the ground petting his dog, playing with his dog. We really felt like maybe he could live 100 more years. Who knows? And then throughout those 2 years that we were with him, his health started disintegrating and leaving him. And it was hard to watch. I think as fans, as friends, we became part of that. And he was very sensitive about showing the difficulty that he was having. He wants to appear like he's, you know, he's an ageless personality, as he says, with no endings and no beginnings. And so that was difficult. And particularly that morning, he woke up feeling really terrible. And it was unclear if the meeting would happen. And so, but as soon as Lin-Manuel walked in the door, it was like everything changed. I remember he stood up, and everybody on his team was like, Walter, you don't have to stand. And it was a big deal when he stood up. And that, I don't think you see that in the film. But as soon as he has to turn on, he becomes, it's like every pain and ache that he has leaves his body, and he's all of a sudden like Walter from television again.
Yeah, he could summon this energy. I mean, again, you know, some people believe in astrology and things of that nature, and many people don't. But he certainly was his own best advertisement for it, in the sense that you begin to think like, wow, sort of elemental energy is this force in the universe, and he kind of channeled it and came through him, and he was able to transmit it to the camera. So I guess that would lead me to ask you, what sign are you guys? Kareem, what are you, what astrological sign?
I am a Libra.
Okay, all
And
right.
Cristina is a Libra.
Oh, see, that's very interesting.
It was actually like our interview question. So when the three of us connected with, you know, we sent, or at the beginning of the process, we sent in our email. This is our original pitch email to the family and to Walter. And we set up a call, and we spent, you know, weeks rehearsing our phone call with Walter, what we were going to say, how we were going to pitch the movie. And we're on the call, and it's a cacophony of noise in the background, because like Latinos, we all talk at the same time over each other. You barely could hear anything. They're like, tell us what you're thinking. We get into our pitch, and then like it's quiet. And then Walter's like, okay, I'm interested in making the documentary, but I have one important question. What are your astrological signs? And we seriously were dumbfounded, because of all the things that we thought of, we never thought that this would come up. And Cristina and I are Libras, and Alex is a Sagittarius. And I guess that was the right answer, because then he's like, okay, I'll do it.
Oh, wow. So he didn't have to go back and study charts. He kind of could sense already that the stars had aligned properly.
Yeah.
Oh.
He read our charts for us, which is a thing that we had discussed that we would never ask him to do, because everybody asks him to do that. That's like, you know, people see him in the street and ask him for their readings, and so we never wanted that to be part of our relationship. But then, you know, throughout the filming process, he had printed out all of our charts and read them for us, and I mean, they're pretty spot on. He'd also spent a lot of time with us by then, but yeah, we felt so lucky to have had that experience with him.
Well, he was a Pisces. I think he was born March 9th. And so I'm the next sign on, which is Aries. I don't know. I wish I could say what any of that meant, but we would need Walter back to explain it all. But I don't know whether, as a kind of fortune teller, he could have predicted the success of the film. But what has the success of Mucho Mucho Amor meant to you each personally?
It's been incredible. He did, I remember, tell us, he's like, this film, I think it was the last time we were with him, this film is going to be a great success. I know. So he did say that it was going to do well, and that it was going to get into Sundance. I think he thought, but it's meant everything to us. I think it's been a hard year for everybody, and I think what's meant the most to me is really seeing on social media kind of how much that the film has meant to people who needed him, and to see his legacy living on. I think it's been really meaningful for us to have been able to capture his legacy and to play a small role in making sure that he is, remembered for what he did and for his contributions and for how ahead of his time he was and for how good he made us all feel. So it's been really crazy. And it's also been fun to watch people who didn't grow up with him learn about him, like Tracy Ellis Ross. I posted this whole like Instagram story of her watching in real time, reacting to the film, and falling in love with Walter. And those kinds of posts have been just filled our lives with so much joy. So yeah, it's been remarkable.
Yeah, I would add it's been 2020 was a difficult year. I mean, I think that we can't gloss over what a challenging year it was. And for us personally, we also realized that it was a very mixed year. As filmmakers, we had a good year in the sense that we made this project that got it to Sundance and all these festivals, even if those festivals didn't actually happen. But it's also been a really good year for documentary film. There's a lot of wonderful films out there, but knowing and seeing that that Mucho Mucho Amor was able to kind of transcend, this year and connect with people. Again, we're skeptics and non-believers, but didn't get made the year before, didn't get held to the year after. It kind of happened when the world needed it, like when we all needed some of that Walter Mercado magic and love. And in what was such a difficult year, full of so many deaths and illness and division, the fact that like right smack in the middle of the year, it was able to come out and connect with people and for 90 minutes make you forget that the world was on fire and make you feel special and loved. And that meant, that means the world to us. We kind of, everybody, we can't all save a life. We can't all find a cure. But if we can all do something that positively impacts the lives of others, how wonderful is that? It's such a privilege for us as filmmakers to do that. And it's the message that Walter always told us, make the world a better place, love each other. And so it's meant the world to us.
Well, I think the important thing is, while you may not be believers in astrology necessarily, you are believers in Walter Mercado.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Absolutely. Perfectly said.
Well, it's been such a treat to speak with you both, filmmakers Cristina Costantini and Kareem Tabsch. Congratulations on the success of Mucho Mucho Amor.